Welcome back, my friends, again to the show that never ends. That's right. We're talking about the political show, not this one. This show has a start and ending, but it seems like it all runs together. But that's just because the mistakes and lunacy continue 24/7, as Joe likes to say about how we're going to fix everything at the ports. 24/7. That's right. What if he knows what that means? Rick Wagner here, getting it right here, conducting our war on wrong. We are the political Vikings, all of us. Because we're disruptors, we sail up on the beach and we get right to the heart of the matter, and people have to start reacting to us, and that's your job and mine. And I look forward to doing it. Now, you got a chance coming up here next week. All these local elections in this weird off years, we have elections in the weird off years, like with the ones with the ones in it, like 2021, ones with the twos, 2022, and then usually they jump to 2024. And so this is a chance. And remember, I know I've said this many times, this is your shot to keep some of the real loons from getting political power. This is your chance to keep them off the school boards, the city councils, all the other places that they start. Very few of them. There are some who are very well financed and things like this who start out in one place and get a fairly high level and move on, but most do not. Even our governor, even the round-headed kid, the malevolent Charlie Brown character that sits in the governor's mansion, started out, remember, he tried to run to be, if you want to call it, I think it was Board of Regents, wasn't it? And failed the first time. But luckily, when you have a couple $100 million in the bank, more than that actually, you could just keep swinging. Most people cannot. What happens is they gather money. People decide this person's a good bet. It's like betting on a horse race to get this job. And they start you out, and it's always a test run, right? How is he going to do? How is she going to do? Can she do this? And if you get stopped early, lots of times that's it. If you get success early, because people aren't paying enough attention or anything like that, now you've got a little win under your belt. Now more people come to you because now you have a little bit of experience. You have a little power over something. You're a little known. And then you march on. Stop them now. Doesn't mean we don't want to stop the ones that already have gotten out of the gate, but it means there's a lot of them lurking out there now. And if you don't take the time to identify, promote the people you like, or at the very least, stop the people that are going to be loopy loons and ruin everything for you, now's the time. That's going to be coming up, we used to have an election day, but now it's just we have a day where we count the votes. Well, we start counting the votes, right? I remember elections where most of them were decided on the day that people cast ballots. Yeah, boy, good old days. That seems so far away now. Now we just count ballots for days and days, and we find them places, and someone opens the trunk of their car, and they find some ballots there, and then they look out when they're fishing, and there's a box floating full of ballots. I mean, it's never ending. It's sort of like a, what is it? The treasure hunt. Yes, that's right. Because it usually happens on the left, is that when the left looks like they're losing, they start a treasure hunt for ballots. And I'll be darned if they don't find some of them. And some of those are the neatest people in the world. Remember they were discussing some of the ballots that they'd seen, and I want to say it was in Arizona, but I could be wrong. It could be in Georgia, one of the two. But I just thought it was an interesting story that they saw them counting ballots on the camera, and they were mail-in ballots, but they weren't folded, right? They're just a stack of them, like you might have gotten them off a copy machine or something. Mail-in ballots don't usually show up in 8.5 by 11 envelopes. Usually they're folded. So people thought that was a little odd. But remember, one of the things we don't know, and this is where the back and forth goes on the election, was it stolen in 2020? Did Trump win? Was it this and that? Is that we are unable to figure out if the scurrilous behavior that went on in some of these elections, and it's clear there was it enough to have changed the result? That's the money shot there. And when it comes to, that's the bank shot that, puts the 8 ball in as the last ball on the table. Yeah, that's what that is. When you go to court, you have to show that, they're going to do anything in the election, is that the fraud that you're trying to show or the errors were of sufficient gravity, strength, and number that they could have changed the result of the election. What happens is people go in with sometimes very good evidence, but it's of a few things and doesn't get any further than that. Now, our media out there, especially the national media, likes to say, oh, well, they didn't get anywhere. Nobody believed them that they had. No, that's not necessarily the case. It's that you cannot prove the extent of it. Very difficult. And one of the reasons that it's difficult is because over the last 10 years, in most states, Colorado especially included, we have systematically removed all of the ways that you can track voter fraud. You can't identify people. The ballots are fired out of cannons, or rather just dumped out of airplanes practically. I mean, they're sent through the mail to every place that anybody remotely at some point that registered somewhere was supposedly at. And then we allow things to come back in with the signatures messy and this and that. There's no strictness to it at all. So we've just arrived at a point where a lot of the votes that you know are squirrely, you can't prove. The ones that you have may be indicative of a problem, but you still can't prove how many of them there were. In your heart of hearts, you might know, but you can't prove it. Many times in the criminal justice system, you have people that you know did something. I mean, you know as sure as the sun will rise in the morning that they're the guilty party, but you can't get enough. That's kind of what happens here. So the only real way to save the election, I think, on a regular basis is to get some of the rules back so that you can actually trace it. Actually see who's voting. Some might, I mean, think how silly that sounds to say to somebody now. Now, maybe not someone that was just, started voting yesterday, but anybody that's been around for more than, 3 or 4 elections. The idea that no one knows who you are, really. Just give them a name, maybe throw an address at them, show up with like a printed page of something that was printed out from on a Hewlett Packard that looks like a bill for your power. That's it. And we know that because just a few years ago, an activist over in Denver who lived in a condominium unit, I mentioned this before because I think it's so indicative, had taken the bill that she got from her condominium association for the power. Because what they did was they didn't have separate power in this building, is that they just shared the billing. And, the building took a certain amount of power, everybody divvied it up, and you got a bill. There may have been a little more to that, but what it was you did not get a bill from Excel or any official company. You got a bill from the building. They just sent you, they printed it off and said, look, we got a bill. This is your share of it. Please pay us. How is that an official document? Well, she was able to vote with that, to identify herself to vote. Now, she took that same document to the Denver Public Library and tried to get a library card. Of course, they wouldn't give it to her. Not sufficient identification. To me, that tells the whole story right there, doesn't it? We've decided that being able to check out a book from the library is more important than verifying who you are or that you're qualified to vote. That's a choice that we have allowed our politicians to make. We are getting a lot of it, and many of you listen to Mark Levin and a couple of other fairly well-versed in the law and constitutional law in particular. People who speak about this will tell you that the secretaries of state, who are part of essentially the executive branch, do not have the authority to change the way you vote on their own. It's always the function of the legislature. The Constitution is clear in that. In this last election, we had secretaries of state, many of whom were elected by very unusual characters. And because we thought, once again, like I talked about the other elections, we thought, well, no big deal, it's just like a state, what do they do? Business organizations, I guess. And so these people get into it, and they said, oh, COVID, we have to make all these changes. Or everybody should be allowed to vote. We shouldn't keep anybody in the shadows by asking them for an ID. And they changed it. And we've had a heck of a time getting those cases in front of the court. That is a problem where the courts have stymied people. I think the law is clear on that in a lot of these. They don't have the authority to do that. That's been found in some of these states, but it didn't change the election because, once again, they couldn't trace enough ballots being changed to show proof that it would have changed the election. Very difficult. We've got to get those safeguards back. Back in a minute, folks.